In regards to my Fallout 3's Hook works and 4's doesn't video, a commenter made a point that was fairly innocuous and frankly at first I thought was a pretty solid one. Well, with the exception of proving once and for all the English language is clunky and awkward. I wish I'd learned a second language in my youth. And then I started overthinking things again. I need to stop doing that. Here's the comment for reference. I find it arrogant to assume to know how someone who just awoke from 200 years of cryosleep would act. We don't even have evidence of how well this technology was tested, and it's very possible that the survivor is suffering from a hangover effect, PTSD from his world being destroyed, utter depression, literal brain damage, or a host of other issues. Now, this comment led me to thinking about the problems with Vault 111 itself, from both an in-world and story perspective. Okay, first, the in-world problem. As far as I can tell, Vault-Tec did most of their WTF-level experiments to assist in the development of colony ships, I think. When a group is that twisted, it's hard to tell the difference between their actual scientific studies and their sick curiosity. After all, Overpsycho Barstow seems to think her experiments are for the benefit of mankind, and frankly, no. They're at best solely curiosity-driven, and at worst, incompetent or malicious. You only need to watch one video on thermodynamics, Thunderfoot, to know the bike one doesn't work. As for how thoroughly the technology was tested, I'm somewhat sure that's what most vaults were actually for. Now, Vault 111 has no real research notes within its walls, at least pertaining to cryosleep. The science staff are only instructed to monitor and record vitals. It is stated in the Overseer's terminal that someone was supposed to monitor the experiment from a distance, assuming Vault-Tec proper still existed in some capacity after the initial set of booms anyways. However, I find remote observation being useful, or even likely, fairly problematic because 111 is clearly designed to test the long-term effects of cryosleep. That is outright impossible without a plan to actually wake up the inhabitants and observe their health and behavior for a pretty decent period of time. And no, observing from a distance would be in no way enough. You would have to have a way of monitoring everything, including their in-depth medical data. Right down to giving them the equivalent of a full medical checkup every so often, to understand what is a permanent issue, what is a temporary one, what is a severe issue, and what is a mild side effect. And to determine how it will affect different people differently. The human body is complicated after all. You would want to know how cryosleep's effects differ between ages, genders, and even people of different backgrounds. That's probably why Sean was allowed in the vault in the first place. Testing on babies. Ugh. This testing would all need to be done in a controlled environment to prevent any contamination to the data accumulated, including the problems the side effects of radiation would cause. If this really is the first long-term test of cryosleep, which it likely is unless the tech was developed immediately after or even long before the discovery of atomic energy in universe. Some symptoms might overlap and you wouldn't know, making your data far less useful or just straight up useless. You would very much want a quote-unquote control vault run by loyal Vault-Tec scientists and their families that first freezes your subjects, then several generations later unfreezes them and integrates them into said vault, all the while gathering medical and psychological data on them without them knowing, to prevent their behavior from being altered by the very knowledge that they're being studied, which honestly shouldn't be that hard. Having a medical doctor, and even a psychologist in a vault, wouldn't be at all odd. People would probably assume the more regular checkups are because illness can spread absurdly fast in a vault, and the doctors don't want to wind up dealing with a mini-pandemic. As for the psychologists, yeah, not only were the vaults supposedly to be used in case of total atomic annihilation, they're also locked enclosed spaces which many people have issues with. Having a therapist around at that point is more than reasonable. So most people probably wouldn't suspect anything of said doctors. Also, vaults are supposed to be a fairly decent size, and you wouldn't likely see every other inhabitant's face on your way in anyways. Now, if you need to justify the actual cryosleep, that's actually really easy. Just tell the inhabitants that the vault itself was technically completed, but the food sources weren't fully completed in the vault. So you have to carefully grow and expand said farms or livestock over time, and will wake them up when the vault is capable of sustaining everyone. Even if it didn't make complete sense, most people would be too panicked or shocked to think about it too deeply. This would also allow you to explain the number of cryopods as well. And tell people they were meant as an emergency stasis in case of some kind of emergency or failure, and a severe food shortage would certainly apply. Now, as for the story problems, well, that's far simpler. If Bethesda is going to give the main character an actual backstory, that backstory should at least try to inform the character's decisions. And as I've gone over in other videos, it simply doesn't in Fallout 4. It would have been so easy for them to add even a single line of dialogue that implies the sole survivor is being affected by their 200 or so year long ice nap. I mean, Mama Murphy is basically clairvoyant, so have her imply your personality itself could have been altered in some way. It would not have fixed the story problems as a whole, but it would have given the player reason to believe any actions they take could be reasonably explained, to an extent at least. Now, before I end the video, I just wanted to say it's kind of a shame that the vanilla game doesn't let you do anything with 111 in terms of the settlement system. If you think about the idea that Sanctuary is on one end of the Commonwealth and the castle's on the other, it would make a fairly secure storehouse for Minutemen equipment, or even a Minuteman bunkhouse. So they would have a reasonably secure resupply depot on that end and not just the castle's end. If the gunners are smart enough to see the tactical advantage of vaults, certainly my 10 perception, 10 intelligence character with a military background is as well. Maybe there's a mod for it. Well, that's all I wanted to go over for now, so thank you for listening to my inane ramblings.